Welcome back. This little video is about proportioning our mesh. Okay, so I've just imported the generic male base mesh, and this is going to be what we use for our full figure sculpts. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys a quick tour of some of the topology, and I'm going to let you guys decide for yourselves whether you want to use this or Z-spheres for your full figure sculpts, but I think that most of you will choose this just because there's significant advantages to having topology, decent topology for the fingers, also the face, and then also down into the legs. Okay, so we're gonna proceed under the assumption that you're going to use this. If you guys want to go off-piste and use Z-spheres, you're welcome to do that. But all the working examples will be using this. Okay, so we're familiar with most of this from, say, the hand exercise, because this is pretty much the hand that was cut off for that. And so we're going to approach the hands in the same way that we did for the hand exercise, and we'll do kind of a non-smooth subdivision to keep our angles. Okay, and then working up, we are relatively landmark free up the arm as far as edge loops go. So we're going to have to make some marks on our mesh to really indicate where the landmarks are for proportioning this guy. Okay, up at the top we have kind of clavicles up here. I think we've seen this in the torso example early on. So this kind of edge loop is meant to indicate the torso, or sorry, the clavicle. And then down here is going to be about the level of the bottom of the pecs. Likewise, if you scan around the back, you can see this kind of configuration right here. These edges and then downwards to here. That's going to be the scapula, spine of the scapula, and the medial border. Okay, and so we're just going to use these as kind of a little bit of visual landmarks for when we start to pose, to just kind of slide things around with the nudge tool to make sure that our general flow of edges is coherent. Once we get to that point and beyond that and start subdividing and sculpting, anything goes. But it's just going to help us get things into the right place when we start posing this guy. Okay, so what I recommend from here for us is to do a non-smooth subdivision, and then we'll turn it back on and do a second subdivision, and then we're going to go through and just kind of etch in with the clay tubes our landmarks. And we're going to use those landmarks as reference points for conforming our mesh using the measurements from the measurement sheet. Pretty much I just want this guy to, in the default pose, to look like our guy in proportions, right? And he's not far off to start with, actually, but I just want you guys to get in the habit of checking and making sure things are the right length, because when it comes to actually trying to resolve a pose, there's nothing worse than having one of your critical joint lengths be off, and then kind of, say for example, the humerus is too short and there's a big arm bend across the torso or something. Hand isn't ever going to reach the right place. It's not going to wrap around the body correctly. So really we're going to try to establish the lengths early on and then refine as we go. Okay, so for now, let's do this. We're going to start by storing a morph target. Okay, and excuse me, I'll just pull that back out. I'll do this from the menu rather than my pop-ups. Store a morph target at level 0. And we're going to do this because the subdivision process can sometimes be lossy and shrink your mesh. Especially if it's smoothed. And we don't want to lose too much more volume in the finger, so I'm going to show you guys how I generally approach this. So first I'm going to turn off smooth, and we're going to do kind of a hard subdivision on our mesh. Okay, so we've seen this before when we did the hands. This is essentially going to keep the angles in our fingers, and in fact I'll probably just let's just see what happens if we turn smooth on and do it now. So it goes a little bit soft, but I think that's okay for now. Okay, and so we have kind of two subdivisions, and this is going to be enough because really I'm just going to really crudely mark our landmarks and pull things around. You can do one more if you want. I think I'll do one more. Okay, and now I'll switch back to level 1 and switch my morph target. And you guys will see the volume pop back into the hands and the fingers. Okay, so that's the difference between the subdivided and smoothed version and the original. So when you pop your switch your morph target back, it kind of reestablishes the original volumes, and then it maintains those as you step up through your subdivs. Okay, at this point, I just want to go through and mark our landmarks. Okay, so this is going to be fairly sketchy, but we want these to just be consistent, and we'll use these as our reference points for measuring and conforming the lengths on this guy. Okay, so first pit of the neck, pretty obvious where this is, and clavicles, pretty obvious where this is too. While we're at it, why don't we just subdivide again? Just so it's nice and sketchy. Eventually we're going to use a Z-sphere rig to pose this guy initially. And we don't want to use this heavy geometry for rigging. So we're just going to step down a couple subdivisions and pose from there. So spine of the scapula, medial border, mostly consistent with what I have in the base mesh. Okay, the acromion is sitting out here, and the acromion is going to give us a couple measurements on the measurement sheet, so we just want to make sure we have that marked. Just put the bottom of the chest in, and while I'm at it, I'm just going to pull up the reference and break in the rib cage. Is not apparent, not obvious, but we're just going to do something like this. It actually comes up here. This epigastric depression we know from kind of our torso sculpts of this guy sitting right in there. You don't see it on this reference because he's fairly tensed in the stomach. Okay, anterior superior iliac spine is right there. Pubic symphysis is going to be right here. Okay, so this is going to give us our inguinal ligament and the base of the stomach coming down through here. And we'll assume that's the iliac crest going back here. And it's going to go back, and it's going to go back to about here, posterior superior iliac spines, sacrum, put a little furrow up the spine. Nothing revolutionary that I'm doing here. Just put a little bit of that in for fun. Next, let's just look down at the elbow, and we're going to look at the olecranon. And this is a little bit more subjective because we don't have a hard. It's kind of somewhere between these two edge loops. And I'm going to put it right about here. Okay, and we know the olecranon is the start of the ulnar furrow, so that's going to go down to what ends up being the styloid process of the ulna down here. Outside of that, we have the lateral epicondyle, which is going to be in a little depression underneath the ridge muscles in this particular pose with the arms straight. And then on the other side, kind of in line, we have the medial epicondyle, which could just be marked like that, the funny bone. Okay, let's see, anything on the hands? Hands and down to the wrist, kind of the end of the radius, and that's about all for now. Okay, let's just see if that's everything we need on the upper body. And that looks pretty good. Okay, going down to the lower body, what we want to do is we want to kind of mark our patella. It's a little triangle, and it looks a little bit silly, but trust me, if anybody saw how these sculpts start, they would think it was a little bit ridiculous, and they might laugh us off stage. But since we can refine it and make it look good, I guess it's okay to start silly. Okay, so then we know that I'm just kind of working up my tibial plateau just to really kind of get the right place for my condyles of the femur. Right, the condyles are going to be sitting right in here, lateral condyle, and that's all I'm going to put in. Right, that's just medial condyle is going to be in here. All that's going to be covered, but we have a measurement that goes from the greater trochanter down to the bottom of the lateral condyle. So we want to kind of get those things established. Okay, and the greater trochanter is going to sit roughly here. Right, I'll just make a little dot for that. Posterior to the anterior superior iliac spine, but not less than halfway out to the back of the gluteal muscles. Okay, so we'll be able to measure from there down. Okay, head of the fibula in here. We don't have any exact measurements to the head of the fibula, but that's going to take us down to the medial and lateral malleolus down here. Remember, the medial malleolus is higher than the lateral one. And so you guys will get a chance to do that on the feet in this week's lesson as well. Okay, and then I think there's actually one measurement on the foot that's from the calcaneus in the back here, which is essentially this big fat pad to the end of the big toe, essentially how long his feet are. Okay, so that kind of starts us off, right? And those are the big marks that we're going to just check for conformation. And remember, don't spend any time really making this look pretty, because in the end we're probably going to take this level, or maybe even this level once it's conformed, and throw the rest away and start posing this guy. So really this is just information. We can transfer all this to poly paint as well at some point if we want. Okay, so the next step in this is going to be actually measuring and transposing our landmarks into the right proportion. Okay, now that we have our landmarks kind of marked and delineated on our mesh, what we want to do is to just go in and start to establish the main lengths of the joints and the overall heights of the torso versus the leg. And we're going to use this with the transpose calipers, right? So if we go to just any of the transpose settings, move, rotate, or scale, as I'm sure you all remember, we've done this before. Let's just grab one of the critical measurements, which is going to be pubic symphysis to epigastric depression. And we're going to use one of these larger measurements as our calibration distance. Okay, and then we'll kind of compare other measurements and build off of this distance. And on your model sheet, this is measurement 2B, and this should be 59 units or 59 centimeters. Okay, so remember to establish this and to calibrate this in ZBrush. We go to the Preferences menu and Transpose Units, and then with the transpose line set on your model, you put in the distance that it's supposed to be. And this is going to be 59 units, and so that's fine. Upper left-hand corner, it says this distance is now 59 units. Good, it obeyed us. Now we want to just check some of our other distances, some of our other critical measurements. And the next one I'm going to look at is narrowest point of the waist, which on this guy is pretty much this whole section. And I know it because I measured it, and it's roughly where the iliac crest goes across. Okay, so we can do that side to side on the iliac crest. And I'm actually going to turn off perspective to help me place the transpose line. And it's just going to be a visual thing side to side, and I'm just going to make sure that it's sitting on the edge on each side. And this should be, if I believe, 30 units across, 30 centimeters across. And we're reading 32. So we're going to pull this in just a little bit on either side and just narrow the waist a tiny bit. Okay, and this is going to be kind of the iterative process. I'm going to do this with the move brush and drop this down to level 1 And I'm just going to push this across. And this is probably going to be too time consuming for me to do real time kind of recording this as I go. But I'll just go through a few of these, and then I'll tell you where the critical other measurements are that you guys need to check. Okay, so now let's just smooth this guy because that might take some off the edges. We're still looking at 31, so we've only lost 1 centimeter. And so again, it's going to be another kind of pull in. And that might be close enough. Let's just see how that looks now. Turn off symmetry again. And getting closer. Probably need a little bit more yet. I'll just do it on the fly, and then I will check another measurement for you guys, okay? So turn on symmetry, get rid of my transpose tool, and I'm just going to pop this in a tiny bit, and then we'll consider that about right. Okay, now let's just look at the anterior superior iliac spines and the distance across there. Okay, so we'll go from here to here. This might seem tedious, and it's a little bit tedious, I agree, but this all kind of pays off as you have reliable landmarks moving forward. So this should be 24.5, and this is 23.7 right now. And so really we just want to tweak these out a little bit. And we can actually go back to level 1 to do this because we have a good vertex landmark for this. Okay, so grabbing our move brush, I'm just going to turn that on and move that out like so, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so 24.5 is the measurement, and that's about right. So 24.6, I think that's fine. If you had seen me measuring with the calipers, you would know that the precision is plus or minus like a quarter of a centimeter. So that's good enough right now. Okay, so that's fine. Let me turn that off. And now we will move to the shoulders and check the widths on the shoulders. Step up so we get a good measurement across the from the suprasternal notch to the edge of the acromion. And we have 2 measurements actually going across. I've taken one from center to here, and then I've taken another one all the way across the shoulders as just kind of a second verification of the widths. Okay, so you can actually use both and just check that they both are consistent. But if your model's symmetric, then it should be okay. Now for this, just look at this one. And this should be, it says 23.2. And I'm looking at measurement number 9, and it should be 42. 42 is all the way across, excuse me. So suprasternal notch to acromion is number 8, and that should be 23. And we are about right. We're at 23.2. Okay, so that is really nice that we have that already established. And from here, let's just work our way down the arms, and we're going to look from lateral epicondyle to the edge of the acromion. And this should be, let me just find the measurement, lateral epicondyle to the acromion. That's number 4, and it should be 33 centimeters if we're anywhere close, and it's 32.3. So we should lengthen the arms just a tiny bit through the humerus. Okay. And we can actually do this with transpose as well if we wish. Make sure you turn symmetry on as you're going. And then just down the axis of the arm will be fine. And actually, in my earlier comparisons against the reference images, it did seem like his arms were a little bit short. So it's good that we have found those discrepancies actually measuring. Okay, and now we are looking pretty good, 32.6. And we can probably just tweak it a tiny bit. We're about 4.4 centimeters off, which is probably within tolerances for the measurements that I was taking, but we'll just make them a little bit longer, something like that. And one last verification to make sure we're not crazy. And there we go. It's sitting at about 33 right now. Okay, so that's a good measurement. That's a good length. And now we have just to measure the length of the ulna, right? And we have a direct measurement from olecranon to the end of the styloid process. Okay, and that's measurement number 3, and this should come in at 29 centimeters. And you can see that we're actually pretty low on this, right? So the forearms are really short by about 3 centimeters. And visually, I hope that you can kind of see that. Let's just look in the side view. It's hard to tell because our proportions aren't quite right yet, so we're not getting all the characteristic contours, so it's hard to judge actual form just yet. But we'll take it on faith for the time being that we're going to lengthen this a little bit. Make sure you have symmetry active. If you hold down Shift, it will move down the length of the axis. Okay, step back up so we have good location for our landmarks. Okay, and we are sitting at 28, and we're still about a centimeter off. Where are we going to recover that from? I'm actually going to recover that by moving. Yeah, I don't want to move our olecranon up. It's about, just recalling where I've measured all this from for you guys at home in the audience. It literally was to the fleshy part where the triceps starts to bulge out, right? So we have this bony bit, and you have a lot of skin in here, and I measure to about this part right here. So if we're short, we are actually short, okay? Because I believe I'm measuring the right location. And so we're still short about a centimeter. And we'll just get that with another transpose. Okay, and I think that's probably going to be about right. It may come up a tiny bit short still. Yep, that's 29, almost spot on. So that's good for our forearms. And now let me just pull up, I'm going to turn perspective back on, and I'm going to pull up our reference. And obviously these guys are not, the arms aren't quite in the same location, but you can see now that given the disparity in rotation at the shoulder, actually the arms look to be in a good place, right? That lengthening of the humerus and lengthening of the ulna put us into a good spot for those, right? Given that I have the shoulders roughly aligned, and that's good. Okay, so let's just bring this guy up. And next we'll move down to the lower body. Okay, with the upper body more or less measured and proportioned, at least in the large scale, let's look at the legs and the hips. So first, let's just quickly check across the greater trochanters. So measurement 17 is 31.5 centimeters from hip to hip through there. And I just want to check and see if we've gone too narrow or if we're okay, given that we kind of narrowed things when we moved the iliac crest in. And we're looking, if I kind of pop those out, 31.5, it's about 32.5, and I think if we just kind of ignored the bumps that I made on the hips, then we are about right on 31.5. Okay, so my mark, my little sculpting mark, is just a little bit too tall. So if I just kind of recess those a tiny bit with a little smooth, we should be fine. Okay, now the big measurement is going to be from the anterior superior iliac spine to the ground, right, to the base of the foot. And so to get this, I'm going to turn off perspective and again get my transpose line, and I'm just going to run this up the leg and make sure we're kind of more or less vertical. And for this measurement, we're looking at 97, right? And this actually says 111. So we're really long through the legs. And to just kind of verify this visually, turn perspective on and look at this guy. And if we line up the shoulders and the arms, you can probably see, just kind of make this a little bigger so the hips are lined up as well. There we go. You can see that we are quite a bit too long in the legs. So you can see his little feet down here quite a bit beyond our guy's feet. So that being said, let's see where we need to take the most length out of. Okay, so it is about 20-ish units that we have to take out or so. But let me measure the upper leg and then the lower leg. So our upper leg measurement is greater trochanter to the bottom of the lateral condyle down here. Okay, and 47.7 is what I have on this, and it should be 41.5. So we're too long through the upper leg by about 6 units. And so 6 centimeters. So let's just adjust that right now because that's going to get us closer with the overall hips to ground ratio. Okay, so again, this is going to be probably a transpose at level 2 maybe. We could go to level 1 if you want. It doesn't matter. And I'm going to just kind of make my transpose mask through the middle of the thigh and let it blur itself. And then I'm going to just make sure that we're shortening along the axis of the leg. Grab the middle, hold shift. And visually, I hope you can kind of see that we were quite stretched through there. And now it should be getting a little bit better. Probably we'll have to take a little bit more off, but we'll see. Greater trochanter to 44.9. We've got to go to about here, so we have to go almost half an edge loop up. That'll give us an idea. Okay, so let's do this. Watch this. This is going to be my half edge loop trick. So Shift S on the canvas. We'll drop this guy, make a snapshot. Which is crazy, but now we can make our mask again, and this half edge loop should be easy to execute now. So we're going to raise this to till it's about here. Okay, grab this. And there's our half edge loop. Except I didn't have symmetry turned on, so trouble. But given that you guys might have similar trouble, Control N, Command N to clear the canvas. He has one short leg and one long leg now. If you guys have similar trouble, like that's just happened to me, here's what you do. Mask this. Actually, let's do transpose mask Mask all the way down here. Mask this. And then go to Deformation, Smart Resim. Hit it once, full symmetry found, which means we're good. Okay? And don't let it happen again. That's what I say. Sloppy. Now, back to where we were. Okay, so one final sanity check on this length. Get this all the way down just so that it gives me the right measurement. 41.5 is what we're looking for. And right about there, that's within our tolerance. Great. Upper leg is proportioned. And now let's look at the lower leg, right? So actually, before I go to the lower leg, I'm just going to look at the drop distance to the ground one more time to see how close we're getting. Again, I've turned off perspective just to give a truer sense of this distance. So kind of vertical on both sides. So we're at 103.6 and we need to be at 97. So probably there's a lot to come out of the tibia yet. And let's just confirm that by taking our measurement from the tibial tuberosity right here to the end of the tibia. And end of the tibia is just down here where it mates with the talus, which is the first carpal, or sorry, tarsal bone. And this measurement is 39.9. And looking at this, we should be at 35, and that's going to coincide pretty nicely with what we are meant to do with our overall length from hips to the ground. Okay, so 35 is going to be what length? I'll just quickly kind of pull this up and make another little snapshot. So we pretty much need to get this all the way up here. So almost to this edge loop is where we're going to try to drag this level. Okay. It's a little bit inexact. This is an inexact science that we're executing right now, but let's see how we do. Now turn symmetry on, boys and girls. Bring this down, probably right about here. This is where it's too long. You can see gastrocnemius back here is probably cool proportionally, but we're quite a bit too long through this section, just visually. So I'm going to let this compress down here. Okay, and now we're just going to do a pull like this. And if my memory serves me, that's about what we wanted to do. Back up to the highest level and a quick confirmation. And we're at about 35.6, 35.5. And so I'm going to leave it. Another tiny tweak is probably necessary, but I'll let you guys do that on your own. I might do this on offline. Okay, and now final check on this distance to the ground. See how we're doing. And 100.9, and it should be 97, right? So the only other space that we're left with is actually kind of this space between here and here, and also the height of the feet. And actually, to me, the feet do look a little bit high, so we can probably shave off a little bit of height by taking this whole length up. And then we're going to be pretty good for the legs. Okay, and we're just going to do this. Let me just blur this a little bit more. I'm going to try to get this further onto the feet, actually. Okay, and That looks more like the feet that we know from this guy. And I'm going to take off that ½ centimeter up here as well. And we're looking at 96.8, and it should be 97 units, and that's good enough for me. Let's turn perspective on. Everything looks ridiculous with perspective off. His legs look short to me right now, but our guy has short legs relative to his torso. When we actually start to proportion the body, things will come into place a little bit better as far as visual appearance. Let's just do a quick sanity check, sliding him behind. Shoulders to line up. And looking at this, hopefully visually you can see most of this stands up pretty well. Okay, from here the last check is to get his head into proportion. Okay, and we'll do that in the next stage. Okay, the last thing that we need to do to just get a start on this full figure is to make sure that our head is roughly in the ballpark of our model's head. Right now, this base mesh just has generic man face on it, and there's absolutely no guarantee that this face is going to match, well, anything, and certainly not our model. So what we need to do first is to see our overall height discrepancy, right? So we're pretty confident that we have the height from shoulders down to pubic symphysis, iliac crest, down to lower leg, and measurements between the trochanters and down to the femur. And so really we just want to assess how all this fits together in relation to the overall height, and that will tell us if we're too big on the head. Okay, and this guy is 180 centimeters tall. Okay, and so we just want to drop a line from the top of the head down. Right, so if you hold the shift, it will drop it down straight, and turn perspective off to give you an idea where your lines actually are, and you can turn floor on to make sure that you hit the ground. And I'll just drop this down to there. And in side view, we kind of want to go to, as you know, the highest point on the head, which is roughly behind the ears, or should be anyways. So this is going to go up a little bit. And I've just made a mess of it, so it's a redo. Transpose is frustrating in that it doesn't have an undo. Okay, we're getting there, we're getting there, we're getting there. So looking at that, it says 181.7, and that looks like floor to top of the head. So he's 180 units tall, our model, so we're really, really close, actually. And so really now we just need to find kind of any minor discrepancy in the big proportions of the head. And having looked at this guy already, I think there's a couple that we'll have to attend to. So the first one is going to be, our first big measure is going to be the bottom of the chin, or the point of the chin to the high point of the head. Okay, this guy's chin is a little bit collapsed right now, actually, just from our funny subdivisions and the way the base mesh was. So I'm just going to sculpt a little bit of a more reliable chin on him. And this doesn't have to be a work of art, it just needs to be a little bit more chin-like than the pointy nub that he has right now. Okay, and we'll get to refining the face a little bit in the next couple lessons. But right now we're just interested in getting, just like the body, a couple of the landmarks identified. And the landmarks that we're going to use are, well, chin, Nothing really on the mouth. This is kind of a minor feature for now. Eyes, we have kind of characteristic edge loops in there. And then the actual hairline is going to be right in here for this guy. So kind of the top of the frontal bone. And zygomatic arch is going to be coming through here. Kind of like so. This is the orbit now. Really just doing this roughly. And the thing we're going to have to do actually is we're going to have to move the ear up to get this looking a little bit better, because the ear is actually considerably too low on this. So I might just do a transpose mask on this ear topology, like so. And then I'll use a big move to just boost this up. All right, so we kind of want the ear hole, which we don't really have in the mesh, which would be about here, to be in line with the top edge of the zygomatic arch, which I've just indicated here. Right, so zygomatic arch should go to the ear hole. And let me just do this for you. My zygomatic arch is lifted a little bit with that. So it's going to come in here like so. And again, what I'm doing here is just very crude construction of the skull. And we'll get into this in more detail in a future lesson. Okay, but really this should shoot into what's known as the tragus, which is that little nub that you put your earphones behind. And then you have the antitragus, which is this little slot that actually is going to be a place where we do make a lot of our ear measurements from, this little slot in here. And it just gives us the ability to triangulate distances. Okay, so we're just going to roughly put that in. I'm not going to do any more to that because, like I said, we're going to throw most of this away. Okay, so chin to top of the head is going to be the measurement that we're looking at. So bottom of the chin to the top of the head, number 18 on your model measurement sheet. And the top of the head, generally, on the guys that I've measured, is right about here. All right, so that should be the high point on almost every skull. This guy's a little bit tall in here, so I'm just going to actually go to level 2 and put a little bit smooth on him through there to get that a little bit lower. So that looks about right. Okay, just to get the big egg of the skull, the cranium, to a high point right there. Okay, now let's just measure this. Bottom of the chin to the top of the skull, right back there. And that's about right. In reality, I've measured back to about here. And this comes in at 27.6 units. And what I've measured previously was, for this guy, was 26.5 units. And so we're about a centimeter too high through here, which is good because if we drop that down, it'll get our overall height of the body to be almost exactly what we want. Okay, so that's one measurement to adjust. And I'm going to go in with the big move brush to just kind of drop this down. Okay, obviously our model has a ton of hair, so these things can be a little bit subjective, but I dug in there pretty hard with my calipers, so I'm pretty confident that we're down to the skull. Okay, let's just turn the subdivisions up. And we have to take off a bit more still. Okay, so I might just do this with a smooth brush. See how far I can get with that. And as I go, I'm kind of just adjusting the overall contours of the skull as well, bearing in mind what I know of the shape of the skull. So we're going to have to go to about right here, really. So we're going to have to go down quite a bit more. That's okay. Just going to do a big grab and a big move. And I have another measurement, which is going to be from the front to the back of the head, and we'll establish that in a minute. Okay, I think that's probably good enough for this measurement that we're looking at here. I've just grabbed it and dropped it down quite a bit. So 26.6 within tolerance. The next big one that I want to see on this guy and actually conform relative to the model is the width across the face. You can see this guy is quite round and pudgy compared to our model, who has more or less a tall head. So I expect our measurement across some of the critical landmarks of the skull, in this case the zygomatic arch, is going to be a little bit off. Okay, so let me just hide the rest of the body, and we'll just go zygomatic arch to zygomatic arch. And I took this measurement from about here. And it's really hard to appreciate the contours of the face in orthogonal view, so you might want to turn perspective on. Makes a little more sense. Okay, that looks about right. And this comes in at 16.4, and really what we're looking at is 14.5, measurement number 11 on the model sheet. And we need to do quite a bit of pull on both sides, a centimeter off each edge to get this into the right place. Okay, so we're trying to get to pretty narrow. In fact, this is going to be about here. So it's going to be a big squeeze, really. And that's okay, because looking at our model, we have to go a long ways comparing them against this mesh. And hopefully you can see just by doing that, the entire character of the face is just changed. Making sure that I grab all the rest of the structure as well. All right, so not just the zygomatic arch narrows, but the whole skull. Okay, we no longer have a chubby round face. We now have a tall, lean face, right? So hopefully you guys can see that one big proportional change makes a huge difference. And that really is what portraiture is all about. Okay, here we go. Let's just put this on, and this looks pretty good actually. The widths that I have, 14.4 across here. Just judge from the overhead view. And this guy probably has to come out a little bit. Yep, I like that. So that's sound. Last measurement is from the hairline to the bottom of the chin. And this measurement was more like this. This edge loop up here is kind of this this length. And this is 20.5. And on our model sheet, we see that it's 21. And so I'm actually just going to, I'm going to make a judgment call right now and boost this up a tiny bit. All right, this came down quite a bit when we were pulling the, do that with symmetry, when we were pulling the top of the head down. Okay, so let me turn on symmetry. Just going to boost this up, give him a little bit more prominent frontal bone. And then we should be okay. Probably go just a touch more, but that's good enough for now. So you guys get the, I hope you guys get the general idea. That should put us in a good place for the overall height and the proportions of this guy. I think probably it's our large shapes that need to be filled in next, and we can do that before we start to pose as well. So we'll probably do a quick kind of volume conformation pass next before we pose this guy, just so that we don't have funny volumes on both sides that we need to correct in our in pose. Okay, so let's just look one more time before we get to that step. So looking really at the shoulders as I do this, width of the shoulders, and the radius of the fingers out. Feet are roughly in line. Height of the head looks okay, and that's good enough for me. Let's end this one right here, and we'll come back and look at some of the volumes. Thanks.